Let's talk for a minute about how we would approach a content strategy from the beginning. You have to ask yourself a lot of questions. You have to define your audience. So this is not going to be anything uncommon to anyone who's done any sort of marketing or professional communications out there. You've got to define your audience first. Know who you're talking to. You have to define your product and understand exactly what your product is, what it does, where it fits in the marketplace, and how it can solve the problems of the audience. Then you have to define your channels. And it doesn't mean you have to use every channel that's out there, but you have to understand, you know what, maybe your business is better suited sending direct mail pieces than taking out TV ads. Maybe your budget helps define your channels. But you've got to pick the different channels that you're going to use to communicate with people. In the social media space, you're going to want to find out where your audience is online, where are they spending time, and what do they like to share, so that you can say, you know what, our audience really doesn't hang out on LinkedIn, so we're not going to focus on LinkedIn. And they really don't hang out on Twitter, so we're going to kind of focus on Facebook because that's where our audience tells us they're going. Once you've defined those three things, then you really define your purpose. What do we want to get out of this? And this is another big mistake I think a lot of brands and companies make, is they start playing in social media and they never actually take the time to define some goals for what they want to get out of it. Are you trying to sell things? Are you trying to capture leads? Are you trying to build branding and awareness? Figure out what it is you want social media marketing to do, and then you'll have a better time constructing content that will actually achieve something. I like to tell people there are 6 buckets of what social media can do for a business, and those 6 buckets very quickly are, it can enhance your branding and awareness, it can protect your reputation, it can build community, it can facilitate customer service, facilitate research and development, or the last one is drive sales and leads. So pick one, or pick 6, or pick a combination therein, and figure out what you want to get out of this, so that when you're starting to sit down and write the content, you know exactly who you're writing for, what you're writing about, how you're communicating to them through the channel, and you ultimately know what you're trying to get out of that communication. There's also the notion, and Joe Pulizzi, who I mentioned earlier from the Content Marketing Institute, likes to ask people, ask yourself what your content stands for. And when he talks about this, he gives a really good example of Gary Vaynerchuk with Wine Library TV, and how his Wine Library TV, the content that sort of made him a household name out there, stood for something. And it didn't stand for selling wine. It stood for making wine accessible. And so you have to sort of define what your content is going to stand for, how you're going to serve your audience, and that will help you obviously better fine-tune your content strategy. So let's dive into some questions about your audience. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because you'll have access to these slides and the recording here. So I want to make sure that we get enough time for questions. But when you're asking questions about who your audience, ask questions like these. Who are they? More specifically, how would I describe my ideal end buyer? Make a persona in your mind of who it is that you're trying to sell to, because it helps you construct content that's more catered to that person. What are your audience's pain points in relation to your industry or your product or even your service? Or what are their pain points in general? Maybe they have some, more broad level frustration that you can help them with. And so I think that, I'll give you an example. The folks at GoToMeeting at Citrix, they have a blog called Work Shifting, and it's a blog that's focused on sort of the independent practitioner who's working out of Panera Bread, or the home cottage industry person, and also professionals who travel a lot. And so Work Shifting is a blog that really delivers really good value to help solve the pain point of that traveling on-the-go professional. And it gives them tips like, great steak places in different cities to eat if they're traveling, or, here's an idea on how you can be comfortable on a plane, and here's some productivity tips so that you can get more done while you're waiting on your plane in the airport. And it's really meta-level stuff. Ultimately, though, the Citrix folks, the GoToMeeting folks, know that these on-the-go professionals need to have a meeting service, some sort of online, webinar meeting solution, and Work Shifting solves a general pain point, but then obviously leads them right to the specific pain point that product or service is going to solve. So a really good example out there of someone who is looking at the general pain points of the audience. Some other questions: how can you make them smarter? The more information and the more intelligence you can give your target audience, the more they're going to like you because you become a trusted resource. What do your buyers need to know? What do they need to know about you? What do they need to know about your competitors? What do they need to know about the general landscape of the industry so that you can make them smarter in their purchasing decision? Chris Hewer likes to talk about marketing as it's not about selling me something, it's about helping me buy something. And it's a subtle change in language, but it actually is real definitive when you look at it. What knowledge will help them do their jobs and what knowledge will help relieve those pain points? Again, if you can solve the problems that your audience has, you're going to become a trusted resource for them. Some questions about that audience: what would capture their attention otherwise? What types of content would they find helpful? What fun topics would they respond to? You might be dead set on making funny viral videos, but if your audience doesn't have much of a sense of humor, then there's no point in doing that. So you need to start asking your audience those questions to figure out exactly what it is that you can produce that will be compelling to them. What types of multimedia would interest or engage them? So those are questions about your audience. Now let's go over some questions about you, because this is where you're going to start getting into the nitty-gritty, I think. What content resources do you already have? Do you already do a newsletter? Do you already produce an annual report? Do you already, spit out speeches and press releases and corporate videos? Do you already have content that you can somehow reshape or repurpose on the web? What expertise do you have? I like to tell clients providing value to an audience in the social media space is much more about sharing your expertise than it is sharing your catalog. I don't care what you have to sell me. I want to know what you have to tell me. I want to know how you can make me smarter, how you can enrich my experience. Because if I like you, I'm probably going to buy from you. But I'm not really interested in what you have to sell. I'm interested in what you have to tell. What tangible items can we share? So maybe you can give away things. Maybe you can give away products or T-shirts or tchotchkes or whatever. But there's some tangible items you can share as well. Who can you interview? And think about this not just from an internal standpoint, because there's probably plenty of people in your company that you can interview that would be interesting to other people, but maybe you go to trade shows, and maybe you have contact with other notable names in your industry that you can interview. The social media sphere goes nuts when we go to conferences. We all whip out our flip cams and start interviewing each other because we have direct contact with really smart people at these conferences so that we can come back and put that information on our blog for our audiences. So you can do that as well. Which team members are interesting? I just have to pause for a moment and tell this story. There was a gentleman that I used to work with at an advertising agency who was kind of, the wily old coot of the building. He'd been around a while. He was an older gentleman, very, very smart. And he was the one guy that you could go to his office for 30 minutes a week and you always learned something new. And I wanted more than anything, on more than one occasion, to just start talking to him on camera and chop up the interviews and use that as our content on our blog because he was that interesting. You've got someone like that in your company more than likely, or you know someone like that you can sit down and just sort of get the war stories and get them on tape and put them, or actually on zeros and ones, and put them up on the internet. And what topics can you have fun with? I mean, that's just, you're always going to want to have fun if you can. I mean, maybe your audience doesn't have much of a sense of humor, but you like to have fun from time to time. So ask yourself what topics are inbounds for having fun with. Some other questions about your company. What results do you want to affect? Think about it. Are you trying to drive people to buy things? Are you trying to drive people to download a white paper, surrender their email address by signing up for webinars, whatever it is? What is it that you want to get out of your content? And then ask yourself some more ethereal questions. How do we want our buyer to feel after consuming our content? Do we want them to feel like they need us? Do we want them to feel confident? Do we want them to feel empowered? Do we want them to feel helpless? I hope not, but it's an option, I suppose. So how do you want them to feel? Think about that as you're composing your content. What action do you want them to take, and what is the value of that action to you? And that's an interesting question, because if you're trying to drive leads, but not necessarily direct sales, so if you don't sell products on your website, but you're trying to drive leads, then you need to come up with a dollar value of what a lead means. If you can do that, then you can answer that question of ROI, because 150 people signed up for the webinar. We think that's worth $1 a lead. That's a $150 return on that particular webinar. So if you can put a dollar